All right, I'd like to go ahead and get started and appreciate all our panelists who are here today, all of them former UNC students who decided that they could enhance their life, their future by going to Europe and spending a year or more after graduation. And we'll hear from our panelists and then we'll allow for a large chunk of time to be Q&A. So I'm going to start with Matt Bravante, who went to Italy, and I'm going to let Matt actually answer both questions at once because he has a constraint. But Matt, I'd like for you to tell us about how you found your program, what was the selection process like, and then get into the second question. What were some of the ups and downs you encountered in your prospective program? Um, how did it affect your future and your career trajectory? And finally, what was your favorite part of the experience?
Sure. So as a bit of background, uh, I am a graduate of UNC 2019, and I did a trip, got close with Dr. Gangi and a couple of the other panelists here on a trip to Germany and the Netherlands as a part of the Burst program at UNC. And it wasn't until that trip that going to Europe to study post grad was on my radar, but largely thanks to Dr. Gangi and hearing about his experience, spending some time in Europe after graduation, and him just really pushing us to look and be curious about it is kind of what set me off on that path. And at UNC, I studied business undergraduate and environmental studies, so I did a dual major, and I knew I wanted to work, somewhere in the where those two interests meet. I was looking in the financial field, in the project management field, and I was going through the recruiting at the business school, and felt that this budding renewable energy sustainability space was not being adequately covered by the resources for recruiting at the business school, and the Institute for the Environment had some great resources, but wanting to stay in the business field within this larger context of sustainability, I decided it would be best to look at some post-grad opportunities that explicitly combine those two interests. And while I was doing that, I remembered hearing all about Dr. Gangi's experience, so I decided I wanted to look in Europe, just to see what was out there, and I knew that there were a lot more programs in Europe than in the States. And as far as finding the program, I spoke with Dr. Gangi a few times about things he knew, and some other professors, but it was really just a lot of web research. I looked at a bunch of different programs, and tried to decide which one was best for me. I ended up choosing the one I went to is at Bocconi, which is a university in Milan. It was the most business focused out of all the ones I looked at, and the most international. I knew I wanted to study in Europe, but did not want to wanted to have international options afterwards. So that's how I came to choose the program, and it was a master's degree in energy management and sustainability. So we really looked at, we kind of broke down the emissions pie, of the world, looking at the major sources of emissions, and talked about how we got here, where we are, and where we're going, kind of with each piece. The recruitment process was pretty standard. It was, I sent in a resume, sent in my undergraduate transcript, took the GMAT, had a couple letters of recommendation, had a few interviews. And this all happened over the span of a few months. But it was pretty, standard as I would think most post-grad educational deals are. And yeah, and that's, I'll answer more specific questions, but that's kind of the recruiting process. And then turning to the experience overall. So it was a full year, 12 months from January 2020 to December 2020. And it was certainly an interesting time to go to Milan. My fortune teller definitely would have recommended against going to Milan, at the beginning of last year. And yeah, it was crazy. 8 weeks in, Milan was the first city that really got hit by COVID. Went into a total lockdown. A few weeks later, I was, talking to my embassy and ended up leaving Italy for a few months. Ended up going back, then it got locked down again, ended up spending some time in Switzerland. So it was definitely a volatile period. And, it it probably was different than it would have been, but all the same, I think it was a very exaggerated version of going and doing a program in a normal time. When you go to Europe or you go anywhere abroad, you're really kind of surrendering yourself to the culture and the people there. And it's a pretty vulnerable position as compared to, going to the college down the road or something like that. And, it turns out, if you do surrender yourself to that and really buy in, you'll meet a ton of really great people. You'll experience a lot of really cool things within, whatever society you choose to go to from a lens that you wouldn't normally get to see, which is really great. And in my case, have a really good dialogue about really global issues, in the case of climate change and sustainability, with a bunch of really interesting people. And my program had, I think, 20 different countries represented. And every day we came to class with a professor from a different country and had a really good discussion about how sustainability problems in the US aren't quite the same as in Germany, and they aren't the same as in India or Venezuela. So that was probably going to, and specifically Europe, where there's so many different cultures, kind of in one small geography, having these dialogues about global problems or multidisciplinary problems with a bunch of students and faculty from a bunch of different backgrounds was probably my favorite. And then the struggles were all had to do with not knowing when I could go here, when I could do this. But yeah, that's my spiel, and I'll take a question or two if I have time.
Okay. And quickly add, you're working now at Bloomberg.
Oh yeah. I can speak. So I work at Bloomberg, a subsidiary of Bloomberg called Bloomberg New Energy Finance. It's a research house. It's pretty forward looking. We look at transition to clean electricity grid, low carbon transport, decarbonization of advanced materials, and I work on the climate technology team. So we look a lot at early stage investing and different kinds of startups. So that's what I spend my days doing now.
Well, thank you so much, Matt. And for those of you who have questions for Matt, he's going to have to leave early, so you might want to direct your question directly to him in the chat. All right, let's hear next from Erin Danford, who is currently in Germany at the moment, finishing up second year of her master's program.
Sure. Sorry. I just graduated in 2019, so I came straight to Germany the day after graduation, actually. I'm doing a 2-year master's of environmental governance at the University of Freiburg, which is in southwest Germany. Most people in the US don't know Freiburg, but it's a really, really nice little city. And I was first here with Jen and Matt when we came on Dr. Gangi's Birch trip to Germany and the Netherlands. And I have to say, I never saw myself living in Germany. It just wasn't on my radar. I could see myself living in Spain or maybe Ireland. But after going on the Birch trip, I was just so inspired by a lot of what I saw. And I really felt like a lot of the things that we had learned about were actually real and were a possibility. So I felt like this needed to be the next step for me. I wasn't ready to just go straight into working at a job that maybe I didn't love. I wanted to definitely be in a place that I was going to love, both for what I study and also for quality of life. So I looked for scholarships and got a scholarship to come over. And I'm now in my final semester. I'm going to graduate after I finish my thesis, so hopefully in September. And I've done a couple internships while I'm here. I worked at ICLE, totally online because of COVID, but that's a network of local governments for sustainability. So that was really neat. And then right now I'm working at a climate consulting group And the great thing about being in sort of the international sphere is that everything is in English. And that's definitely a benefit for you as a native speaker, because most of the people you'll be working with have good English, but you'll always be the person to proofread and everything. So it's a huge leg up, and you can work without knowing the language, but you definitely should know the language for everyday life. But I would definitely recommend taking the leap to anybody that's considering it, even considering Corona and everything. As long as you're allowed to travel, definitely just being in the city and being able to be outside is amazing.
Thank you so much, Erin. Let's now hear from Jennifer, who also was in Germany.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer, and I was with Matt and Erin on the summer 2017 Birch summer study abroad with Dr. Gangi and Dr. Cor Rademacher in Germany and the Netherlands. And I graduated from UNC. My undergrad is in environmental studies and political science. I really enjoyed being in Germany and the Netherlands. And after I graduated, I wanted to find a way back to go back to Europe. I just felt like they were so far ahead in terms of renewables, which is what I'm interested in. And I worked for a solar company in Durham for a year, but during that time I was trying to find a way back to Europe. So I was looking for master's programs and other opportunities. Via Google, the opportunity I found it's called the Congress Bundestag Youth Exchange for Young Professionals, but the abbreviation is CBYX if you want to look it up. And it's a program for 18 to 24-year-olds who are interested in cultural diplomacy and exchange, and you specifically go to Germany. So it is a two-way exchange. So the Department of State sponsors 75 US citizens to go to Germany for a year. And then the reciprocal part is the German Bundestag, their government sponsors 75 Germans to come to America for a year. And as part of that application process, the application was due, I believe, November 1st, and it still is. And there were some essays required. There were essays, transcripts, things like that. And then there was an interview in person, and then I was told I was selected. And in July 2019, I moved to Germany. And as part of the program has three components. The first is 2 months of language school, so intensive German language, like 30 to 35 hours. You're in a German classroom really learning German. And you do not have to have prior German experience to participate in this program. I did not. I tried to study some on my own, but the program accepts all language levels. So whether you're a beginner, medium, or more advanced in German. That was the first part of the program. The second part was the university phase. So I was at the University of Bremen in Northwest Germany, about 3 hours west of Berlin. And you're able to take classes in what you're interested in. So I took courses in European Union law, another law class, I took another intermediate German class because at that point I was the intermediate level. And then the fourth class, I was in a fourth class that I'm forgetting now, but the university phase is also in German. So I could you're really focused on learning German. And then at that time, then the third phase is the internship phase. So during that time, I was also applying to internships in Germany, and I applied to an internship that's in Bremen for a wind and solar energy developer, and started working for them in January of 2020, and really, really great experience. And then in March, the pandemic hit, and returned to the United States, but continued working for this company. And I'm still working for them, I started a master's program, the Master of Environmental Management program at Duke in August, and am still working for this wind energy developer. But as far as the Congress Bundestag program, would definitely, if you have an interest, would definitely look into it. As I mentioned before, you don't need German language skills, but you will learn German. It does look good if you have prior German experience, but they accept students from all backgrounds, not just environmental studies or political science, but also engineering or business. In your interviews, you'll probably be asked, what's your specific interest? And for me, that was I wanted to be in Germany because they were so far ahead of the United States in terms of renewable energy, and I really wanted to learn about what Germany was doing. So that was the selection process. The ups and downs, the ups and the good things were definitely being able to be in Germany for what was supposed to be a year. I really liked that 1 year time frame. I felt like it gave me a lot of opportunities to just be in a different place and grow academically and professionally and linguistically in terms of the German language. So and then downs was COVID was a bummer, but and then my favorite part, my family was able to come, my family from North Carolina was able to come in December and visit me, and we went to Berlin and Hamburg, and that was really fun.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Jennifer. And next, we're going to move to Eloise, who actually has a bunch of continental experiences to discuss. So thank you for being here, Eloise.
Yeah, I'm like super excited to be here. I feel like I'm gonna like explode with happiness. So fun to talk to you guys. Yeah, I'm really impressed by everyone who spoke, because my situation is a bit different in the sense that a lot of my family live in Europe. So for me, it's not like it's, I grew up coming here. My dad lived here my whole life. So it's not like, I think it's a big jump when you're coming from UNC and maybe your experience is North Carolina or somewhere in the US. So I'm first really impressed by everyone who does take that jump. I think it's super cool. And yeah, I think it's amazing if you guys take advantage of it. After UNC, I graduated in 2010. And after UNC, I came to France to be with my family. They live in Toulouse. And it's actually really funny. I don't know if you know this, Greg, but you told me during one of our meetings, because I was taking environmental studies class, you were like, Eloise, you need to get a technical skill or you're never going to get a job. And I was like, I don't know how to do math. I don't know how to do science. Like I'm going to be jobless. And when I got to France, I taught English for a year. And then I entered into a master's program that was in French, it's called what is it called? Geoinformatique. It's like GIS, computer programming stuff. And yeah, and it was for a year. And in France, master's programs are really cheap. So I actually paid for it with savings I had made from UNC. And I'm going to be honest, it was in 2010, I think, I don't think the world, we've changed so much as a world in 10 years. And I don't think French programs were international, as perhaps they are now. So it was probably one of the worst experiences of my life. It was really, really hard. We had a class, I was expecting, UNC, we're going to have great relationships with our professors. We're going to have really great discussions. And no, class started at 8, it ended at 5 in the afternoon. You went home, you were there was no interaction. And then the other side was I could speak French, but I didn't know French on a technical level. And that made a huge difference. So it was really hard. I got through it. I didn't fail, which I really thought I would. And I got out with a technical skill. So I think in the end it was worth it. and my French is a lot better. I made 2 friends, one from Italy and one guy from Guinea-Bissau, and those are my only friends. So yeah, it worked out. It worked out really well. And the program has changed a lot. So if you guys are doing GIS, it is still around. It's a good program. It's in Toulouse, which is in the south, which is a really lovely city. And you eat really well. There's really good wine, and it's nice weather. So I think my strategy in Europe since then was even though a lot of my family is here, I didn't have citizenship. So my strategy until like 3 years ago was always, I need to find a place that gets me a visa. So I got to France, I got this student visa. And then because of the GIS skill, I got a visa to go to Crete and do like archaeological research doing GIS stuff. And then the Netherlands has these awesome PhD programs that pay you and you're an employee, you're not a student, and you have healthcare, you have vacation, you have an office, and they also have awesome PhD programs. A lot of them are like very interdisciplinary, really international, because the universities are super international. I'm sure Sarah will talk about this more. So I got accepted into a PhD program that gave me a visa and also a job. So I moved to the Netherlands for 4 years, and I was in Leiden. And compared to France, like if you want to go somewhere in Europe where your life is super easy and everything is like, you have an appointment at 10:10 at like the mayor's office, you're going to be there at 10:10. Like it's amazing. The only thing is the rain, but it's like super easy. They take really good care of you, especially as a PhD student. I think you usually have an advisor, and my program was really, really big. And in the sense that there were like 40 other people who all joined and started their PhD at the same time, which made a lot of like, camaraderie. And yeah, I mean, it was a super cool experience. I was very lucky because I worked in the Caribbean. So I did a lot of all my research was on land change and in agriculture, in like rural landscapes in the Caribbean. So I got to escape the Netherlands in the winter, which was super nice. And so after that, I finally got citizenship and I moved to Spain because I was tired of the weather. And I've been here now for almost, I guess, 2.5 years. And Madrid is a really, really fun city. I mean, yeah, COVID was really rough. I was with my family, so I was very lucky. But Madrid is a great city. It's super international and fun, and like, it's a really nice quality of life. So I'm like super impressed by the people who just spoke, because it sounds like you guys really had a like a plan, and I really didn't have a plan. And I sort of like followed the sun. Yeah, but looking back on it, I think that, like, the best experience is, I don't know. I just think I came back to DC for 6 months. I was born in DC, and I came back to DC for like 6 months right after my master's program, because I was like convinced that I wanted to get like a consulting job. I wanted to go work on K Street. I don't know what I was thinking. And I got there and I just hated it. And I didn't feel like I fit in anymore. I felt very like I didn't understand why we were paying so much money for a glass of wine. Like I just didn't, it just made me, I don't know, I just was really unhappy. And obviously I miss my family a lot in the States, but there's just like if you get like the right sort of balance down, there's a really nice quality of life that I really enjoy. And I think that, I think it's really important to, especially now, like we've had such a change in how we live. I think it's really important to prioritize family and friends. And that's something that I think in the States, sometimes we forget because of how work is and how life is sometimes. And for me, it's really important. So thanks for having me. And if you want to know more about any Netherlands PhD programs or this master's program in France, I'd be happy to share more links.
Well, thank you so much, Eloise. And I'm sure a lot of students were laughing when you mentioned the skills part, because I still give it to every student I talk to. Some version of that talk.
It is very good advice, though, I have to say. Being in an interdisciplinary program, I can tell you, yes, you need to have a marketable technical skill.
Yeah, thanks for that support, because I keep pushing that message. So next we're going to hear from Molly, who was in Scotland and interesting, did an agricultural focused program like Sarah, who will speak a little later, did. And there's a growing interest in this topic at UNC, but we don't have a lot of food and ag related classes. So doing an abroad program afterwards is a good way for students who are interested in this space. So thank you so much for being here, Molly.
Great, thank you. And good morning, afternoon to everyone who's on the call. I graduated with a bachelor's from UNC in 2009. And my trajectory after that, so I had a summer internship with the EPA in DC and leveraged that into a full-time job in RTP for a year after graduating. And I identify with you, Eloise, saying that, when you know something's not a good fit, and so a few months into that job, I applied for the Peace Corps, and then from 2010 to 12 was a Peace Corps volunteer in Benin in West Africa. And while not the subject of this webinar, if anyone on here is interested and has any questions about the Peace Corps, please do feel free to contact me. So I was an environmental, loosely defined volunteer in the Peace Corps. And that was my first foray into international development and what that looked like and what that meant, and learned as a volunteer what food security meant and what a lack of food security looked like. So that became my motivation for looking for a graduate program in food security. So I, as Greg mentioned, so the program that I ended up joining was at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. So I applied there and to UC Davis in California. And as some others on some of the other panelists may attest to, one of the big deciding factors for me in choosing Edinburgh was the fact that it was a one-year master's degree. I didn't start graduate school directly after undergrad, so I'd been out of school for a few years. I was interested, I knew I wanted a master's, but I wanted to get to work after that. So the one-year program really appealed to me. And frankly, at that point, I had traveled a little bit. I was interested in trying something new, experiencing a different education system. The fact that the courses, the courses were taught in English, and I know that is the case in many countries, but it felt like kind of, I could take a risk while still knowing, I know the language. I think I'm pretty confident I can get by. But it was interesting just to be exposed to a different kind of education system, different structure of courses, and different relationships with professors. So I really enjoyed the program. Like I said, it was 1 year, one full calendar year, 2 semesters of courses. And then as part of that program, there was what they called a study tour in the spring around April, May. And we, as a group, it was a pretty small program. We traveled to Paris to attend a conference there as a group, and then to Rome. We went to World Food Program, and had some meetings there, and kind of got introduced to what that organization looks like. What are some career paths and opportunities within that. And then after that, over the summer, I was able to do research in Malawi. And what I did my research on was the interaction between food security and tree use. So how people are using forests and trees, what they do with them, and what that has to say about their food security. So all in all, I really enjoyed the program. I skipped over this, but the application process, similar to what Matthew mentioned, was fairly straightforward. It was, pretty similar to applying to undergrad, honestly. I wrote some essays. I had taken the GRE, but that was not a requirement for the University of Edinburgh. And it was a fairly streamlined process to apply. So, as others have said, I would definitely recommend at least considering, opening your prospects to international programs. There's a lot out there. And as Greg alluded to, there are some of the programs that we've studied, you can find similar programs within the US, but some you really can't. And I was doing a lot of Googling and didn't see a lot about food security. And I really felt that that was what I wanted to study. So Edinburgh had a program specific to food security, and it looked really interesting and exciting. So definitely encourage everyone to do some research, talk to your advisors, talk to fellow students, and consider broadening your horizons if you haven't previously considered looking abroad.
Thank you so much, Molly. And sticking with it loosely within the theme of food, I'm not sure how much Sarah in her master's fisheries, how much you looked at fish as a resource, as food, but tell us about your experience in Norway and the program you did there.
I was like, which Sarah is up next? Yeah, hello everyone. I am Sarah Bobbe. I think I might be the fossil on the call here. I graduated UNC in 2005, so it has been a while, and my career path was not very straightforward. I majored in international studies and minored in geology at UNC, but I did find myself taking a lot more like environmental studies. I don't know if anyone is majoring in international studies, but you can essentially kind of like do a lot of classes and a lot of things. And I did a lot of the kind of more environmental studies and science-based classes. But long story short, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do after school. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, decided that very quickly was not the case. I did the Japan and exchange and English teaching program, the JET program, the year after I graduated. So yeah, if folks have any interest in that, feel free to ask me questions. It was a great program, but not why we're here. But after that, I went to DC and I got a really cool job working with NOAA and the Department of Interior, working on the coral reef conservation. Yeah, working in coral reef conservation. And it was a really great job, really great time. You know, like, it sounds like a lot of folks had like their DC experience in their 20s. And I really enjoyed my job, but I was really lucky to get that job without a master's. Most of the time, those jobs definitely come after a degree. And so I knew I wanted to go back to school. My problem is I did not know what I wanted to go back to school in. It was really hard for me to determine once I decided I didn't want to go into law, like if I should be doing more geology or do business. And because of that, instead of applying to grad programs, I started applying for scholarships. So I applied for a Fulbright to go to Norway, and I also applied for a scholarship to study in Japan. I think that was just my way of feeling like I wasn't committing to a specific program and a career path, but I kind of ended up doing that anyways by getting, I ended up getting a Fulbright in Norway. So if folks have questions about Fulbright too, I'm happy to answer those questions. But basically I had just met someone who had a grant, a Fulbright grant, and I'd always thought it was this like unobtainable thing, like you had to be this perfect student and have this amazing idea. And then when I started to do some research, I mean, you know, I'm sure that like there's obviously requirements for it, but depending on the country, like each country has very specific, you know, some countries have specific topics that they want folks to research, others are more open, but I ended up looking at Norway just because I'd always had an interest in Scandinavia and more Arctic issues in general, and that's what I do for my job now. And yeah, they just, you know, the acceptance rate was like 15% at the time, which is not, you know, if you have a good idea, you're driven, I figured I may as well try, and ended up getting the scholarship. And in the process of doing that, I realized that I could also just get my master's in Norway because There was no GRE, which I don't know if that's the case for some of the folks programs that they did in Europe, but a big appeal was like not having to take a GMAT or GRE or any of that. And so I essentially got the Fulbright and then applied for a marine biology program because that was what most aligned with my research project, which was on marine spatial planning in the Arctic in Norway. And so, yeah, I ended up in the marine biology program at the University of Bergen. And I will say just in general, Norwegian master's programs, it's really, I encourage you to look into, mostly because it's so easy. Like there's one website that's literally like, do you want to do your master's in Norway? And then you just say, like, look at all the different topics you can study. And then it tells you which universities in Norway that you, that you can apply for. And it's just very straightforward. And I will say the program was different. Like folks mentioned, the education system at least 10 years ago was quite different. Like there was a much more hands-off approach where like you would just go into the classroom and someone would be giving you a PowerPoint presentation if it wasn't a lab, and like half the class like wouldn't even be there and you could just like read about it. And but then I was just so used to the US system where you were like supposed to be at class and attendance and participation that like I thought it was very odd that like half of my friends just didn't even go to class, and then there'd be like one exam at the end of the semester, which was always like kind of a different stressful thing. But it ended up being worth it because with at least within my program, and I gauge at least in the more science oriented programs in Norway, it was very like research focused. It was a 2-year program where the first year was courses and then the second year was your master's. But the opportunities for folks to like get on really great field work and research surveys and stuff was like astounding. I don't know what people in the US experience, but I always thought like as a master's, like getting on a research cruise was something that was like super hard to do. And in Norway, it was like super easy to be in my program, and we're always going out on cruises. I got to go on, I ended up getting like pretty easily like jobs in the summer working on fishing boats and doing really cool stuff. And I actually did 3 months at the University Center of Svalbard too, which is this university that's the world's most northerly university. And it's science-based. They have programs in like geology, biology, but they also sometimes have more policy like summer courses and stuff. So if anyone's interested in Arctic conservation, I say definitely look at UNIS, because when all said and done, like Norway has a lot of money. I mean, they have a lot of funding and political will to put towards science. And so even at like the master's level, there just seemed to be so much research. Like at UNIS, like we were doing this field work that honestly, it's probably very expensive. Like we were out on snow machines, like going to our field sites. We had, access to boats to do our field work. There was even a class that would like take a hovercraft to their field site, but it was just, Norway is an affluent country, and luckily they have the like desire to put that money towards research and like understanding, how to best conserve like both their natural resources and their ecological, gems. So, yeah. So, an important point, it's free. Like everything in Norway is free, the master's. So I'd say the main pros are it's free. The admissions process is pretty straightforward, and you have like a lot of access to pretty cool field work. I'd say the con was that I could have probably stayed in Norway. I really loved my time there, but I did want to come back to the US, and I actually live in Alaska now. Like I wanted to work in the US Arctic. And getting a job when I got back was quite hard because I just didn't have the connections to folks here that I would have had normally. Like I think it would have been very easy to stay in Norway, but when I decided to come back here, it took me like a good 1.5 years to get a job in the field. And I think even now I feel very lucky to have the job I do, which is working at Ocean Conservancy, like a medium-sized nonprofit doing Arctic conservation work. And it was worth it. And I think, my experiences, like my personal experiences in the Arctic are what got me the job. But that's definitely one thing to consider, is that you probably wouldn't have like necessarily as many connections back in the US if you went away. But you also, in the end, like that didn't make a huge difference. And I'm really glad I did it. So yeah, I think that's really all I had to say. But if anyone has any questions about studying in Norway or Japan or Alaska, feel free to ask.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for telling people you were in Alaska. It's like 88 degrees here in North Carolina, so people were probably
really?
looking
That's
at you.
Why the headband and the down coat's probably really confusing. This is like my outfit year round, because my house is always at like 60 degrees. It just makes no more sense to turn it up, because then it just, yeah, anyways.
People were probably wondering, where are you? Okay, our last panelist is still working on her master's thesis, but I understand you're just waiting for it to get processed. You're pretty much done. Sarah, second Sarah is in the Netherlands now, and she'll tell us about this great agricultural university that she's been studying at.
Yeah, hey everyone. Yeah, my name is Sarah Wright. I am a master's student at Wageningen University in Research, which you may have heard of before. Greg's been bringing some Wageningen people towards the Clean Tech Summit in the last couple of years, and they're kind of, pretty well known in Europe and getting more well known internationally for some of the work they do here. But yes, I'm just finishing up my master's. I'm actually finishing up my internship component is the last thing being processed. So I think the final stamp should be placed on the document next week, which is exciting. Yes, I graduated Carolina 2018 with a double major in environmental science and math. So I definitely followed Gangi's advice to have a technical skill. Definitely got that talk as well. And it has, paid off. Although I think the math degree crushed my soul more than I like to admit. Yeah, but I, like Eloise, actually had kind of an easier path because my dad is British. And my parents met doing the expat thing in Switzerland back in the mid-90s. So I've always kind of heard stories about, all the fun they had in Europe, just running around and being in their 20s and, doing the expat thing. So that's kind of always been on my radar. And I actually heard about Wageningen through a National Geographic article my senior year at Carolina on hydroponics and how Wageningen was kind of, and the Netherlands were the greenhouse of the world. And that was something that I was really interested in at the time. At Carolina, I focused most of my work on like water, energy, agriculture systems and the nexus. So I was very interested in water and how it related to food and energy systems. And when I was looking at Wageningen online, they have a whole master's devoted to international land and water management. Yeah, if you're interested in water, the Netherlands is definitely the place to go. They've been managing the water very well since about the 1200s, because most of the country is underwater and a lot of it is reclaimed land. Yeah, my application process was pretty crazy. I applied at the end of June in 2018. Yeah, I was an August grad, so took a couple classes over the summer and also interned after that. But yeah, applied at the end of June, found out I got in half July and then moved here half August. So really fast. And that was possible because I was a European applicant at the time. Brexit has since unfortunately changed that status, but yes, that was all quite easy. Moving here was definitely interesting. I didn't know anyone and just hopped on a plane with a bag of clothes, but I really enjoyed the process here. So it's a 2-year master's, and all the masters here at Wageningen are a year of coursework. And then the second year is a 6-month thesis and a 4-month internship. And they really, really focus on group work and international work through the courses. So all of our cases were super international, and they made a real effort to have all of our groups be very international. Although oftentimes it ended up, me being the token international person in a Dutch group, which was always amusing. Yes, and then the thesis, most people in my program went abroad for their thesis. I wrote my thesis on the Mekong, but actually wrote it from the Netherlands. And that turned out to be quite fortuitous because COVID hit and a lot of my friends had to come home and actually restart because they didn't collect enough data in time. So that was all pretty crazy. But yeah, definitely a very, very international program. I think there were 60 of us in my cohort, probably half of us were international, and I think we had 15 or 20 countries. So definitely a wide range, a lot of Europeans, and then a lot of Chinese and Indonesians, and yeah, all over the world, which is cool. Yeah, and then they also have the internship component, which is really, really nice. You do a 4-month internship, and I know a lot of folks who have gotten jobs from the internship component of their masters. And the university here really focuses a lot on process as well as content. So how do you work in a group? How do you work in a team? How do you work across language barriers? How do you work across cultural differences? And then also with the internship, having learning goals and really thinking about professional development and what you're trying to get out of every experience, which I really appreciated. Yeah, I think I covered everything. Yes, but yes, ask me about the Netherlands, ask me about the cold weather here. Do not recommend looking for the sun. Ask me about the quantity of cheese the Dutch eat. I don't know. Let me know.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. Let's open it up now to questions. I see a few already popping up. The first is just a concern that has nothing to do with academics, or it's just adjusting to life in another country, like how easy is it to get set up with a bank account, a phone, housing. Was this really difficult, or did you have assistance? How did you work through this process?
I mean, I would recommend, like, from what happened in my experience, uh, the Netherlands is amazing to go to, and maybe Sarah can agree with me there, but the Netherlands makes your life so easy. Like, they helped me do everything at my university. Everyone speaks English, so unfortunately, I learned very little Dutch. Or maybe fortunately, I don't know, it's not my favorite language. And they make your life super easy. But on the other side, I feel like my family's French, so I feel like I can say this, but I think they make your life on purpose more difficult than it needs to be. So
All
I
right.
will say, even in the Netherlands, yeah, my university had resources for all these things, bank accounts, housing, all these things. But everything is, when you're abroad, everything's just a little bit harder, right? Like, which yogurt do I buy at the grocery store? You just have to think a little bit harder about every little detail all the time. So especially the first, month I was here, trying to get used to the new system of learning and the academics, as well as, being in a new place, it was pretty overwhelming. And yeah, Dutch is not an easy language. So I definitely still rely on my help, from Dutch friends when I get forms in the mail and I just don't have the energy to translate it myself.
Yeah, I would say definitely. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Erin.
I second what everybody else said. And depending on your program, like we wrote in the chat, sometimes there might be really great resources for you. But either way, be prepared for a lot of surprises because you're going to a foreign country. Everything works different. Even things that you would expect would be exactly the same, like a doorknob, are just going to be different. And you're going to have a lot of surprises, especially financially. There's going to be a lot of taxes and fees and things that you don't expect. Your rental agreement is going to work differently, and it's probably not going to be in English. So the best thing you can do is use your resources. Don't try and do it all on your own, or you're going to get really overwhelmed really quickly. So one thing I did was find a tandem partner. So I found a German friend who wanted to learn English, and we would meet up and speak English for half an hour and then German for half an hour. And a lot of times I would just ask her these questions like, what is this ridiculous letter that I got in the mail saying that I have to pay for public media or a dog tax or whatever, which that is a thing. You have to pay a dog tax in Germany, but not a cat tax. So having a German friend sometimes is really helpful because they say, oh, it's ridiculous. Don't worry about it. Just fill it out like this. And then another thing is to look to your fellow expats. I also joined a Facebook group called Americans Living in Germany. And it's literally thousands of Americans that live all over Germany. And you can ask these ridiculous questions like, I'm an American, why do I not have a garbage disposal? And they'll answer those questions. Oh, actually, many years ago, Germany made this weird law. And so look for people that can help you and don't try to do it on your own. But still, you're going to have times of stress. Just remember why you did it in the first place.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in to say one piece of advice, what I agree with what others have said. And one piece of advice that I would share is to arrive early. A lot of programs, undergrad and graduate have some sort of like orientation period. We went on like a little kind of field trip with our group in like, a couple hours away or something, but give yourself time, right? Like, I mean, one little anecdote, I arrived in Scotland in September coming from, as 90-degree North Carolina, packing shorts and all this stuff. And I was freezing cold immediately. I went out and bought a hot water bottle. I bought a comforter. I mean, all of these things that you don't know, you haven't been in this country before. You haven't had that experience. But so arrive early when you can. Also look to both your program, your university, but also other students. In a lot of these programs, you are definitely not going to be the only international student. So other people are approaching these challenges too, maybe from a different perspective. They're from a different country, but they too need to open a bank account. So I asked fellow students like, well, where did, there's all these different banks, which one did you choose, So lean on others as much as you can, and then just, try and think about you're both, the challenge is both the master's program, but also the experience of living somewhere else. And that's part of the program.
Okay. There's been a few attempts to answer this in the chat too, but Stephanie has a question. She'd like to know what are some of the difficulties with looking for a full-time job in another country?
Yeah, I think Erin, you also spoke to this in the chat a bit. So I'm looking for a job now because I'm just finishing up, so I can speak a bit to this. The two main things are visa and language, in my experience, right? So you have this great degree from this great university, you have some connections, but are you able to stay in the country, and can you speak the language enough to get a job? As someone mentioned previously, right, like we are very, very lucky to be native English speakers, and that will take you a really long ways. But for example, like in the Netherlands, if I want to consult here, all of my clients will be Dutch. So I don't speak enough Dutch to do that. So my options are definitely limited in that regard. And then, yeah, visas can be challenging. So a lot of people have told me that looking at larger companies or American companies here is a really great way to do that, because they're used to having more expats in their ranks. As a way to kind of, make the process easier for you, because they're really used to dealing with all these questions and really used to helping you relocate and, set yourself up and do all these institutional things, but also because, yeah, you're able to speak English full time and, have a little more support with your visa process on that end.
Yeah, I have to say that's probably the hardest way to go, just from what I've seen so far, because if you come in as a student, at least in Germany, if you study at a German university, you have, I think, either 6 or 18 months to find a full-time job afterwards, and you're considered a skilled immigrant, so you get preference on jobs and things like that, and that makes it a lot easier coming in as a student, because then Germany kind of has an incentive to keep you in the country, because they've essentially paid for your education, giving you this virtually free master's degree. Versus if you're coming in straight from the United States, usually most of the job calls that I've seen will ask you to already have a work permit, which you can't get without having a contract from an employer. So again, it's that bureaucratic thing. Like if they were to give you the contract, you could get the work permit, but it's the chicken and the egg. So I honestly, to this point, I don't have an answer for it yet. I think you'd have to find somebody who went that route.
A former student that Molly knows, Mary, actually did her last undergraduate semester in Denmark, and she's been very successful at finding jobs first in Denmark and then with a Dutch company. She lives in the U.S. now, but only because at some point Denmark's not that inviting to immigrants. She'll probably be able to go back, but she has to pass a fluency test in Danish, among other hoops to jump through. But she did a good job for several years working in Denmark. Let's see if we have any other questions. We're have some people who are going to have to jump off soon. Not seeing any more in the Q&A and the. Okay, I think there are no more questions. I think you guys covered everything that students were interested in. So I'd like to thank you all for participating. We've recorded this. I hope that's not an issue. We'll put it online for students who couldn't make it here today. And hopefully you'll inspire a new, hopefully large cohort of students to think about going abroad. And that's especially important now in that students who are juniors and seniors now in the US have kind of missed their opportunity to do study abroad as an undergraduate. So I hope they'll think about still making it part of their life story. Thank you to everybody. And this was great to see you all. Some of you I haven't seen in a decade or more.
Yeah, and if anybody has further questions or you're interested in our programs, feel free to just find us on LinkedIn or whatever. We'll see that you're a UNC student. So
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. Take
Bye.
care, everyone.
Bye.
Hey.